Consumer habits are changing fast. Barilli captures real-time behavior insights by polling targeted audiences on social media, where they show up as their most authentic selves. Get the clarity you need to drive more foot traffic and marketing buzz. Visit askbarilli.com. That's AskBrilli.com to learn more.
Hello and welcome to Menu Talk with Pat and Bret. I am your co-host, Bret Thorn, Senior Food and Beverage Editor of Nation's Restaurant News and Restaurant Hospitality.
And I'm Pat Cobe, Senior Menu Editor at Restaurant Business. Welcome, everyone.
Yes. And how are you doing, Pat?
Great. I'm looking forward to going to the restaurant show later this week. So that's going to be a lot of fun, always is, and a lot of tromping around the show floor, checking out what's new.
Do you have comfortable shoes? That's very important.
Yes, I do.
Good.
Yep.
Yeah, I have my New Balance sneakers, because I have wide feet and New Balance has wide shoes. But then I learned once I started wearing New Balances that they're also trendy and fashionable among the young people. So, I'm just naturally cool, I guess.
You definitely are.
Thank you. And I've been eating at restaurants, which, as you know, is our job. I went to a preview of Sweetgreen's new collaboration with the New York fine dining Korean steakhouse Cote. They developed some sauces and a kimchi green apple sauce that they handed out in bags and that I then proceeded to break. So I didn't get to try the applesauce, the kimchi applesauce. But although it was on the salads and bowls that we tried, so I guess I got to try a little bit of it, and it was very, very tasty. And, this is something that Sweetgreen's been doing for a while, these collaborations. The first one was actually years ago, I think 10 years ago, with Dan Barber, who had his whole anti-waste thing going on. I'm sure he's still, because why wouldn't he be? So they figured out things to do with carrot strips and broccoli stems and stuff, and had what they called a wasted salad.
I think they also use some of his row 7 vegetables that he grows from those row 7 seeds.
Yeah, probably the kogi nut squash,
right.
Which is a big hit. I'm a supporter of all of that. And they've worked with, Sweetgreen's worked with Nancy Silverton in the past and all of that. And this is the latest one. And of course, it dovetails well with all the trends, has all the bold flavors and the and Korean flavors, which people enjoy. I certainly enjoy them.
I mean, steak is really a big deal in fast casual now.
For sure. That's a good point. And this dovetails on the steak, the garlic steak that Sweetgreen introduced last year. But yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of talk about chicken. Everyone wants to eat chicken. But for limited time offers, beef does really well. We saw that Noodles & Company just reported their results, and they talked about how great steak stroganoff was for them, and they indicated it'll be a returning LTO every winter because it's appropriate for winter. Yeah, and who else? Everybody's been doing fun things with steak, kava and steak. A lot of steak.
Is Sweetgreen using the same steak that they used for the garlic steak bowls, or is it?
I believe it's the same. It's tri-tip.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So, yes, I think so. Well, that would make sense. It's unnecessary to get a new SKU for summertime LTO, I think. And, Korean barbecue isn't necessarily summery, but the idea of barbecue, obviously, is something that we think about a lot in the summer. And summer's coming slowly but surely. We had a summer day for Mother's Day this weekend.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
At least until at 7, it started to get colder, but it was a beautiful sunny day. Mm-hmm. Happy belated Mother's Day, by the way, Pat.
Well, thank you.
And Shake Shack has its whole new barbecue lineup. Have we talked about that one already?
Yeah, I think we talked about it last week. But
yeah, and Cracker Barrel has brought back its campfire bowls. I went to a tasting of that. They have the campfire bowls are kind of interesting because they're actually cooked and served in aluminum foil, as though you were to cook them on a fire when you were camping.
That's cool.
Yeah, or two of them are. The beef and the chicken are, and they're all baked together with corn on the cob and red skin potatoes, and it's a whole thing. And those are fun. But now they also have a shrimp skillet, which is not cooked in a fire. It's just served in a big skillet, but has the same seasoning, and it's shrimp and andouille sausage and corn and potatoes, and a sort of a buttery broth, and a s'mores brownie skillet, which, what's not to like?
Yeah, no, that
Brownie.
sounds like fun.
Yeah, there's roasted marshmallow and very prominent Hershey's chocolate. Like it underscored for me how distinctive Hershey's chocolate tastes. Because like, if you eat chocolate and it's Hershey's, you know it's Hershey's.
Did they call that out on the menu that it was branded Hershey's chocolate?
They say that it's Hershey's chocolate bar. It's just called a s'mores brownie skillet, but in the menu description they say Hershey's. And then there was a lot of talk for some reason, I'm honestly not sure why, about the Ube Espresso Martini that Starbucks Reserve Roastery just came out with. And everyone's like, ooh, Ube, which, yes, Ube is beautiful. It's purple. But it's also been around for a while and is in a lot of places. So I don't know why everyone got so excited that Starbucks introduced it. Not at all Starbucks locations, but at 3 Reserve Roasteries in Seattle, Chicago, and New York.
Well, I think, we're in New York and ube is very prominent here, but I think if you get to the middle of the country, it's not as prominent. And one of the roasteries is in Chicago. Not that that's a backwater city, but I think people are just catching on to ube and matcha. Those are still kind of emerging as flavors. They're not quite mainstream yet.
That's a good point, Pat. You and I are plugged into what's happening in restaurants, so we run the risk of getting jaded before we really need to. At least I do. I get jaded easily.
Definitely, yeah.
But during the restaurant show, often I'm staying near the Starbucks Reserve Roastery. I forget where I'm staying this time because, I'll find out when I land and look it up and I'll go there. But that was during the restaurant show that I got to try the oleato, the olive oil coffee line that they have discontinued. But I was pleasantly surprised. I was expecting to hate it because
Me too.
it's stupid. But especially with oat milk, which is another thing that I don't really care for, but oat milk with olive oil and coffee suits my palate. I had no idea.
No, I like the cortado, the short one that they did. I thought was the best. The latte didn't appeal to me, but I tried them at the New York location of the roastery. But yeah, they're sadly no longer. I guess not enough people liked olive oil coffee to make it a winner.
That means if you want to do that, you're just going to have to bring your own olive oil to a Starbucks.
True.
Well,
speaking of ube, I had a good interview this week with Tous Les Jours, which is a French-Korean bakery cafe. Their biggest competitor is Paris Baguette, so both of them are growing rapidly in the U.S. They both have, more stores in Asia, but they're both really growing in the U.S. And they do a lot of ube drinks, both drinks and pastries that are purple. And people, they really feel that that's a differentiator, that people really aren't as familiar with ube yet. So
there you have it.
And it's very Instagrammable because,
Yeah, I mean,
purple food is pretty.
for sure. It's a beautiful purple. I mean, I don't know if there's an ugly purple, but it's it's really a lovely thing to look at. And matcha too is that nice bright green. And I think matcha is an acquired taste for Westerners. It's very grassy and rather bitter and, good for you. But but all tea is good for you and it's pretty.
Well, when you combine it with sweets and in both beverages and pastries, it kind of like counteracts the bitterness, and people just think they're getting the benefits of matcha, but they're getting it in a sweet form.
Buried in sugar and fat, which
Yeah.
makes it, yes, they're getting some antioxidants, but you run the risk, I think, of fooling yourself into thinking that you're eating a healthful donut, which that's not a thing.
Right.
I also, have I talked about I'm Donut yet?
No?
I went to a preview a few weeks ago of I'm Donut, and it's a question, the name of the restaurant. It's a Japanese donut concept that had 5 locations and then just opened their first one in the United States and their 6th one anywhere near Times Square.
Oh, cool.
And I'm not exactly sure why it's called I'm Donut. Maybe because it's expanding the possibilities of what a donut can be. Because one was like a pig in a blanket donut.
Oh, interesting.
One was a teriyaki chicken ginger donut. The donut itself was still sweet, but obviously it was
Right.
savory to eat. And it's certainly a visually appealing place. It's kind of pricey, but the donuts were very, very tasty. They specialize in what they call nama donuts, which just means fresh donuts. And I just assumed that, if you're going to a donut shop, the donuts are going to be fresh. But
Well, it's really interesting, this when I spoke to the people at Tous Les Jours also, we talked a lot about treat culture, and people are really into these small, affordable treats as kind of a way to, treat themselves, I guess, is a good, because maybe they can't afford to go out to dinner anymore, but they can afford a donut even if it's pricey, or they can afford, a cake, a slice of cake. So
respect that. And we deserve a treat.
definitely.
Donuts are challenging. Go out and have a donut sometimes.
Yeah.
Right? Don't overthink it. Embrace joy. And you know how I said these things are not nutritious, although that's true. That doesn't necessarily mean they're bad for you, because happiness is really good for you.
Definitely.
And not just like it's nice to be happy, but it's healthy for you to be happy. And so if having a donut brings you joy, have some joy.
Definitely. It's really interesting how, like, so many Asian desserts are becoming popular in the US because they were not really too well known. I mean, when you used to go out to a Japanese restaurant or Thai restaurant for dinner, I very rarely ordered dessert because it wasn't that great. But now there are all these Asian desserts that everyone's, clamoring for.
Well, there are Asian desserts inspired by Western desserts.
Right, exactly.
Which, the Japanese and Koreans have long been good at taking things that we do and kind of making them their own, refining them a bit and, presenting them back to us as a different product. And they do a good job. So,
Yeah, there's a lot of French influence too. So,
right. Yeah, they're called Paris Baguette and Tous Les Jours. Like, they're not hiding the French
right.
influence, but doing it in their own way, often with lighter, softer textures, which is really nice, in fact. And speaking of Asians, but a different part of Asia, I interviewed a chef who is building her career here in New York City. Her name is Rasika Venkatesa. And I say she's building her career, but she was the chef de cuisine at Mourad in San Francisco for a couple of years. So, she's not nobody. She's been in the United States since 2019. And immediately when she arrived, she got a stage at the French Laundry.
Wow.
And, was a commis there, like a prep cook. Has, built a name for herself. And now she has not a restaurant, but a concept. She does pop-ups with it called Mythily, which is the name of her grandmother. She's from Tamil Nadu state in India, and a lot of the food that she prepares is Tamil or Tamil inspired, but it's not only her grandmother's food. She traveled all over different villages and towns in Tamil Nadu and collected a bunch of recipes. Sometimes she had to actually create the recipes because a lot of cooking all over the world, certainly in India, doesn't have recipes.
Right.
It's a pinch and a smell and a touch, and you bring it all together. So she would go to these villages and make the cooks that she was meeting weigh everything and measure everything so she knows how many grams of everything goes into anything. And she explains that process, and she talks about what's unique about Indian food, and it was really, really a super fun interview, and I'm sure it's also fun to listen to. So I hope everyone enjoys it.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear.
So, Rasika Venkatesa, you have a new restaurant, Mythily.
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 Yeah, so if you break up the whole word, that's my, T, Lee, so Mythily.
Mightily. But it also sounds like something you do with great presence of mind and force. Mightily. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
With
Mythily.
great might.
So yeah, it has a lot of might to it if you think about it. It's my grandmother's name and she's a strong woman, so
That's wonderful. And you opened it recently. So tell me all about it. When did it open and what's it like?
So Mythily is a restaurant concept. So we are in our pop-up phase right now.
Okay,
So
great.
we are not a full service restaurant yet, though I am fundraising for it to be a brick and mortar soon. So Mythily is a progressive South Indian concept that I started last year in New York City. And we focus on a lot of unspoken and traditional dishes of South India, specifically Tamil Nadu, which is a state in South India. And I take a lot of inspiration from my family as well. So my grandmother, being the biggest inspiration in my life, has always inspired me throughout my whole career. But once I finally decided to step into my South Indian upbringing fully, I think it really propelled me to take this concept further. So Mythily takes unspoken dishes from South India, but pairs it with what's available locally in the East Coast. And we take the skills that I've learned throughout my career and we all build it into one big concept.
Neat. So yeah, you've been working in restaurants. You arrived in the U.S. in 2019, right? And you worked in the Bay Area at the French Laundry and Alexander Steakhouse and Rich Table, and you were at Mourad, wonderful restaurant. Surely you were cooking in India too, I'm guessing, but you certainly landed on your feet when you arrived in the Bay Area, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I was cooking in India, but I was still in college at that time. And I graduated in 2019 actually.
Oh, and you
And
came right
I
out.
immediately moved to the US. So in India, I did worked at a bunch of hotels. I did a lot of internships abroad while I was still in India. So that's where Alexander Steakhouse came to play. I also did lived in Sydney for 6 months and worked over there. So I kind of jumped around a little bit for short periods of time. But I always knew that I wanted to move to the US to kind of take my career further. And that's when the French Laundry happened. It was my first official job outside of college. And it was straight into, a high pressure 3 Michelin star restaurant that I think my 20-year-old self wasn't really prepared for. But I think that it gave me such a good foundation on how I need to view my career, where I wanted to go, and how hard I needed to push to prepare myself for the future.
I mean, the French Laundry is known for its exacting requirements, its attention to detail, trying to make everything better. Is that accurate, do you think?
Yes, that's completely accurate. I think that kind of attention to detail and technique and skills that you learn in that restaurant, you won't learn necessarily anywhere else. They always say there's a French Laundry way to do things. And I completely agree with that. The kind of focus that you inherit working there, the kind of hustle, the kind of everyone is pushing for the same thing, and it's to be the best. And that kind of mentality you don't really see at most restaurants. You only see it at that 3 Michelin star level.
How did you get there?
How did I get there? I applied on culinary agents from India. The sous chef at that time reached out to me. They're always hiring commis. Commis are prep cooks that come, early in the morning, prep at the kitchen for 10 hours or so, and they don't work service. And I, wanted to be a commis there. I applied and I got a reply back, and the sous chef offered me a stage, which is a trial period at the restaurant. And just with that email, I booked my tickets to San Francisco. I arrived in Napa at an Airbnb, and I trialed at the French Laundry without any job confirmation on a 20-hour flight.
Well, good for you. I mean, you got to try stuff, right? You got to go for it.
yeah, you gotta go for it. And honestly, like being so young, you don't have anything to lose at that point. And like it also gets you to America. It gets you in the vicinity of, if that didn't work out, you go to San Francisco, you apply to other jobs, right? And you just like, keep applying, keep starting, and you go through the whole motions. But after 2 days of trialing at the French Laundry, I got the job there, and I started a few days after that, and ever since then, I was just like pushing, pushing, pushing.
Are they nice there? Because to me, it just seems really hardcore to work at the French Laundry.
It's hardcore. I mean, you have to have thick skin to work there. Like, you can't, it's not a place to take shortcuts. It's not a place to chill. It's not a place, like, if you want an easy job, you shouldn't work there. And because I still am a sponge, but when you're fresh out of college, you are a sponge. And if you really, really want to learn, you have to push yourself, and you have to take like all of the small aspects of what they're trying to correct you on, what they're trying to teach you. You have to, instead of taking it to heart, like, they're trying to micromanage me, it's actually like trying to make you better. So I think like the mentality aspect of it, being able to handle pressure, handle stress, and not like let that get you down is so important when you're working there.
Do they still have the closed circuit TV with the per se kitchen? When per se
Yeah,
first opened?
constantly there. Yeah, yeah. But everyone's too busy to actually notice the TV.
Still, it's kind of interesting to, have that kind of partnership, I guess,
Yeah.
fellowship among other chefs or whatever. So you said you started doing Mythily last year. How did that come about?
So Mythily, it came about after a few kind of light bulb moments over the past 3 years. So I was the head chef of Mourad. So after French Laundry, I moved to San Francisco. I got a job at a Moroccan restaurant called Mourad. And I started off as on the hotline as a fish cook. And then COVID hit, but I still kept working through there. And then over time, and in between, I worked at Rich Table. The pandemic, you're going through layoffs, you're getting new jobs, layoffs, it's a whole thing. But once I finally settled back into Murad, I kind of got quick promotions in that space. And for me, it was my home for close to 5 years. I think being at Murad, really taught me a bunch of things. They put a lot of responsibilities on my shoulders because they knew I could handle it. And I loved leading a team there. Like the team there, they were my family, and I loved the guests, the regulars that came and walked in to eat my food. It was really an amazing moment in my life. I think towards in 2023, I realized that, I loved being at Mourad, but I also wanted an opportunity to represent my cuisine. And it just sort of happened, the mentality happened out of nowhere. Like I felt suddenly like really wanted to start cooking more Indian food and venturing into that because I had a lot of training in French cuisine, Moroccan cuisine, a little bit of Italian. So I was cooking all of these different cuisines, but I wasn't professionally actually cooking Indian cuisine. So for some reason, I felt that urge to venture into my own cuisine. So once that happened, simultaneously, I was approached by Top Chef, the cooking competition, and they wanted me to apply for the show. And I didn't think I was ready. I mean, I was only 24 or 25, and I was like, I don't think I should be on TV now. And I don't think I'm ready. But my mentor, Mourad, was like, you should go for it.
Yeah.
So I applied and they selected me. So when I went on that show, I told myself that, okay, I'm going to represent myself. And who am I? Am I a chef that just has worked for the French Laundry, has worked for Murad? Am I a chef that just cooks that food? Or am I a chef that has their own identity? And that's when I was like, I'm just going to cook South Indian food on the show, even with not much of practice. And I'm going to do it my way. So I kind of went on that show with that mentality, and I took dishes that I grew up with, a lot of it based on memories of how my grandmother made it, and I put my own twist on it. And a lot of it, well, they loved a lot of it, and a lot of it did well. So post that show, I was like, okay, I did that on global television. So let me just like leave San Francisco, go back to India. I spent like three months in India, and I just traveled around the state of Tamil Nadu where I did a whole research trip where I visited 20 to 25 villages and towns. And I gathered more than 1,000 recipes, spent time with the locals, just like hopped around from different places, and essentially wanted to know what my cuisine was and what my state had to offer. And it's so diverse and it's so splendidly just eye-opening to experience that, just being Indian myself, like how amazing one state of India can be. And I think after that, I was ready to go to New York, start my business, try just keep popping up, keep cooking in New York. Mind you, New York is also a new market for me. It's not like I grew my career in New York, but I felt like San Francisco wasn't going the same trajectory that my career was going. Like I was ready to start a pop-up, open a restaurant, but I felt like economically, SF wasn't the right place for me to do that at that point of time. So I was like, let's just move to New York. And I had a lot of connections, personal connections in New York, so it made sense. And yeah, I came last year. I started Mythily. I have a LLC. And I've been doing pop-ups and private events, just cooking a lot, getting my food out there. I recently did a 4-month residency where I took over a restaurant at Full Grounds' Laundromat, and I made it my own. I got to test out my concept, do that market research, prove to the investors that I'm going to pitch to that this is a concept that doesn't exist in New York. There's demand for it. I have the supply, so you have to invest in me. So right now I'm fundraising and I'm looking at locations and so on and so forth.
And showing up on podcasts and stuff. So are you from Tamil Nadu, or are you from a different part of India?
I'm from Tamil Nadu, yes.
Okay.
I grew up in Chennai, which is a city in Tamil Nadu, and I grew up a lot of the years. I stayed with my grandparents and grew up with them.
So returning home, you visited how many villages did you say, collecting thousands of recipes?
Like 25.
And it's interesting, you said that on Top Chef you cooked from the memory of your grandmother's cooking. So did you just like say, well, this is how it tastes, let me, and you grew up in India, so you had some familiarity with the food at least, but was it like a sense memory trying to create something that your grandmother made?
Yeah, I think like over time, like even when I was working in other restaurants, like whenever I would talk to my grandmom on the phone, or like I would always, like even when I'm cooking at home, I would always ask her like, how do you make this? How do you make that? What is the spice mix for that? And I would always like note that down. So I had like, I had like small notes of her cooking, and it always like played a role on how I would cook the menus that I would make at Mourad as well. Like I would always put some kind of Indian influence in dishes, and it was always from her. So I feel like, and I tell people it's like ingrained in me. And especially like when you have such a big passion for food and love for food, and you've grown up seeing someone of that, like a powerful chef, who is your grandmother, have that same love for food, I think it just automatically is impactful and is ingrained in you. So I think that it didn't feel like I was taking this whole, like, it didn't feel foreign to me because it is part of me.
Well, and Indian cooking, as I understand it, is a lot of it is cooking by feel anyway, right? I mean, your grandmother probably said you add this much of it, or a pinch, or a little bit, or some of it, and then you cook it until it feels right or smells a certain way or whatever it is. So but you did collect recipes somehow. How did that work?
You're absolutely correct. Indian cooking is all about the feel of it. And it's so funny. Like every time I see my grandma and go back to India, I actually like spend time with her and like try to collect like I watch how she puts the spices in, or watch how she does her process. And I can kind of like gauge like how much it would weigh, how many tablespoons it is. But for my trip, when I collected the recipes, wherever I went with a scale and a micro scale. And I actually asked them before they would throw things into the pot. I would make them stop, weigh it, and then throw things, and I would note it down for each recipe I learned. And I have that all documented. I have like a whole Google Drive of like pictures, videos, recipes, and it was all documented. For me, grammage is very important because especially like with historic cuisines, if you want to share that with, the West and people of other countries, it's very important that recipes have like weightage and like it, there's some kind of way to follow the recipes. But I always tell people, like when it comes to Indian cuisine or any other cultural cuisine, it's so important to see someone make it for the first time or watch a video to see like how things are started. Because the start of any curry or any gravy is very important. Like, and it's very different from like Western European cuisines, right? So it's always important to see how someone does it or a video of someone doing it, because that way the process is correct of how it's done. Because you can read a recipe, you see the ingredients, you see the method, but actually seeing someone doing it is very different from reading it.
One also tasting it. So that, because obviously the measurements are very, very important, but maybe my turmeric is different from your turmeric. And so, you have to also know what something's supposed to taste like, I would think.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like, and it's all very, there's so many variables, right? Especially with Indian food. Uh, it's never going to taste the same cooking it outside of India when it comes to any, ethnic cuisine, any food anywhere. But we always try to get it to the closest, and always try to use the best ingredients wherever we are. So I think that those are the most important things. And honestly, with any kind of spices that you get, any kind of ingredients that you get, at the end of the day, it's like how you make it that matters and how you season it. At the end of the day, the seasoning part is the most important part. And you can get the flavor. You can get the flavor and cook from the heart, right?
Right. Yeah. Cook like you mean it, and people will taste it that way. So does Indian food start differently from, say, French food? French food, you start sauteing your mirepoix, whatever, and stuff. In Indian food, India is a country of more than 1 billion people with however many 20 some odd states, and everyone's grandmother has a different culture and a way of doing it. But in general, how, at least as a Tamil, how do you start a dish, and how do you go from there?
In my household, and keep in mind that even in the states of India, within the state, there's different communities and households, and we have different religions as well, right? So each household does things differently, surprisingly, and not everyone does everything exactly like how I'm going to say it. So I grew up in a household where we were vegetarian. We are in a caste and community called Brahmins, and we eat a certain kind of food that's it resonates with our community. So typically, how we start like any dish, like a dry curry, is usually with Indian sesame oil. And a lot of our dishes are very tuned to the health benefits of how the food is going to benefit your body. And that's how like our ancestors have thought about food. So there's a lot of Indian sesame oil. And this is cold pressed sesame oil, which is different from the Asian sesame oil, which is roasted. And then you have curry leaves, you have black mustard seeds, you have black gram lentils, and dry red chilies. So these five ingredients are a common thread that you will see in how you start South Indian Tamil curries. And you also have something called as asafoetida, which is a natural, what I like to call natural MSG. It comes from the arrowroot plant. And that is something that we add in the start as well when we're tempering these spices, blooming them in the oil. And this also adds a flavor to the end product. So these are the 5 or 6 ingredients that we start off our curries and makes it so unique to our community.
Yeah, what the French call mirepoix and the Caribbeans and a lot of Hispanics call sofrito. This is your
Yeah.
thing that
Yeah.
starts everything going. Wonderful. So at your Mythily pop-up, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing it right, Mythily pop-up, what are some dishes that you enjoy making and that your customers enjoy eating?
Oh, there's many. I keep changing things up with many menus that I do. Like at my residency at Four Francis, I changed menu like 8 times. And I always like, because I'm still like building this concept, I'm trying to try out as many dishes as I can, new dishes, surprise people. I think one dish that has been a standout is something called the beetroot poriyal tartar. So obviously you know what a tartare is. You have a beef tartare, lamb tartare. You've even seen a beetroot tartare, carrot tartare. You can make tartare out of anything. But I wanted to make a South Indian version of a tartare, and I wanted to highlight beetroots because it was winter. So I used yellow and red beetroots, and the way, like I told you, the mustard seeds, the sesame oil, the black gram lentils. So how you start a poril, which is a vegetable side dish in Tamil cooking, you kind of bloom all of these spices and cook the beetroots in that, the spices. And then you add a little bit of water to create steaming so that the vegetables are cooked. Cook those beetroots, and then with the trim from all of the dicing, we made like a beetroot chutney out of it. So that was the binding agent of this tartare. Added some pickled pomegranates, some smoked oysters, some Castelfranco radicchio, and then the whole tartare is topped with something called namkeen. So namkeen is mung beans, dry mung beans that is soaked and then puffed in oil. So it's fried lentils almost, and that's spiced with red chili powder. So this is a dish that has so many textures going on and so many flavors because it's sweet from the beetroots, it's spicy from the hint of the dry red chili in the tempering. It has crunch from the lentils. It has sweetness from the pomegranate. So there's like a lot texturally and flavor, a lot going on. So this was something that people really liked. Another dish that has been super popular is, for me, when I make desserts, I always go by Indian desserts that I really love to eat and that are really simple. And I do like my little twist on it. So an Indian dessert that I really love is called rasmalai. It's made with cheese, so basically milk that has been curdled, and you get the cheese from that, kind of like ricotta. And you make balls like dough and balls out of it, and you cook that in a sugar syrup. So I took this concept and I married it with a tres leches cake. So this cheese that I made, I infused in the cake batter. So you get the softness, sponginess of a cake, but also the denseness of a cheese. And it's soaked in a saffron milk because rasmalai, the Indian dessert, is soaked in a saffron and cardamom milk. And then you top this with a whipped white chocolate spiced with red chilies and juniper berries. There's some oranges and pistachios and almonds. So I take those flavors that make me nostalgic, but I want to reinvent it to make it new because I want people to know that I'm not just making any, like, just like usual Indian food that you get in restaurants and for takeout and stuff like that. I want it to stand out and show that, this Indian food can stand next to a French cuisine or Italian cuisine and be up there. Like, you can pay money for this food and really enjoy the flavors of it.
Yeah, I mean, totally. And it's interesting. I don't know. In New York, there's a fair amount of Indian food and a growing amount of South Indian food, but a lot of it from the other side, from like Kerala, the Mangalore coast, and all of that. The Malabar coast, that's what it's called. Not a lot of Tamil, or maybe I just haven't seen it. I don't know.
I mean, Sema, if you know of Sema,
Yeah.
the chef is also Tamil, actually, and yeah, he is.
Yeah, I didn't know it was Tamil.
Yeah, so I'm very good friends with him. Sema is also a representation of Tamil culture, but they also take a lot of influences from the surrounding South Indian states, and so do I. I feel like South India, the 5 states of South India have like commonalities between them, but they also have things that make them so distinct. But we all take inspiration from each other. And Sema's food is more, it's highlighting a lot of rustic dishes that the chef grew up with. Because, like I said, we have different communities. So the chef of Sema grew up in a different community where he grew up with a lot of meat in his upbringing in the village that he grew up with. Whereas I grew up vegetarian because we're of different communities and different castes. So that really plays a role on how we look at food because it's very different. And because I've had training in different kitchens, I reinvent the food in different ways. So, yeah.
Well, and I'm guessing that you eat meat now because you've cooked at a lot of meat places.
Yes.
I won't tell your
I
parents.
need that.
Yeah, because Tamil Brahmins are strict vegetarians normally, right?
Yes. Tamil Brahmins are strict vegetarians, but my dad also my dad was a rebellious kind of Tamil Brahmin. So he started eating meat, and kind of introduced that to my brother and I. And then once I decided that I wanted to follow the chef path, I was like, I want to learn, how to properly cook a piece of meat and how to, because when you look at Indian curries, a lot of the meat is like, it's braised, right? When you make curry, you cook it for a really long time. The meat falls off the bone. But I was interested in like the French way of cooking meat. Like, how do you cook a piece of steak, or a tenderloin, a lamb loin, and like poach a fish? Like, all of these techniques I really love. But I also love the flavors of like a long, super long cooked curry. So my whole goal is to like treat ingredients with a lot of respect, with a lot of love, and also like pair it with the spices that I really love growing up with. So meat is definitely like something that I wanted to learn and keep it part of my arsenal. But I take pride on being like very vegetable forward as well. Like every pop-up that I do, I make sure that I have a whole vegetarian menu that people can opt for, because I understand like what it is to be vegetarian. And I also understand like what it is to be vegetarian in a Western country, because you don't get that many very options at restaurants. And a lot of the times vegetarians are treated like a substitute, and they're not. They just don't eat meat, you know?
No, you're fully actualized people, even if you don't eat meat. It's all good.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. So when can we enjoy Mythily next?
So Mythily is gonna be popping up at a bunch of restaurants in June. So I'll be doing a pop-up at Hags. It's a tasting menu restaurant in East Village. It's spelled Hags. And I will also be doing a more casual communal style pop-up on June 15th at a ceramic studio in Brooklyn, where I will be showcasing a style of wedding feast that we eat in South India. It's called Sapadu, and it's basically done on banana leaves, where people sit in long rows of table. They have their own banana leaves, and we basically scoop at least 10 to 12 dishes on this banana leaf, and people eat by hand. So that's also something like these traditions of eating by hand and like everything that is very traditional in India. I want people to experience that. It's a very immersive experience here. And I did one last year and people loved it. Like we sold out super fast, and it's something that people are really keen to experience. So I'm doing that pop-up in June as well. And you can follow, like we'll be popping up at, a bunch of other restaurants over the summer and the fall.
And where should we follow you if we want to follow you?
Yes, on Instagram, you can follow, my personal Instagram is Chef Rasika V, and Mythily's Instagram is mythily.nyc. And you can also subscribe to our newsletter at rasikavenkatesa.com, where we send our guests and patrons all of the information of our upcoming events and pop-ups.
And Mythily is spelled Mythily, right?
Correct.
Anyway, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me, Rasika Venkatesa. And I'm looking forward to checking out your food at a pop-up or when you open a brick and mortar someday.
Thank you so much for having me on, Bret. It was really lovely talking to you.
Likewise.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Menu Talk. Like and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Pat Cobe.
And I'm Bret Thorn.
See you next week.
Consumer habits are changing fast. Briley captures real-time behavior insights by polling targeted audiences on social media, where they show up as their most authentic selves. Get the clarity you need to drive more foot traffic and marketing buzz. Visit askbriley.com. That's AskBrilli.com to learn more.